Hi everyone, Evette Rose here. And guys, welcome to today's mini workshop where we're going to be looking about how to become a better communicator. Hi everyone, Evette Rose here. Guys, I'm really looking forward to diving into this mini workshop here with you today, how to become a better communicator. Now, guys, quickly, just before we start, just for those of you who are new here, my name is Evette Rose, and I'm also the author and founder of Metaphysical Anatomy, which is a big book of 679 medical elements. And this is all the psychosomatic stress for adults. Your body is talking. Are you listening? If you have those issues in your body, maybe psychological stress, and just can't figure out what is the root cause, what is your body trying to tell you? There's accumulated trauma and stress, and this is going to put perfect words into your body. So it will help you to understand these messages. And absolutely, we have one for kids as well. So if you have kids, if you love to work with kids, this book is going to be fantastic for you. And your ancestry is talking. Are you listening? So even if you are an adult and you have some unresolved childhood, stress there that you haven't quite been able to figure out, that book is going to be fantastic for you to know and understand your DNA lineage and the patterns from it also so much better. Guys, also we have the MAT Level 1 Trauma Release course, which is all about this big book as well. Learn the healing technique behind this, as well as the intuitive body workshop, learn how to read the body like a book. And then we have an intuitive spirit guide workshop where I teach you how to work and connect with your guides and also how to heal with them, become a medium, as well as how to speak to and communicate and heal animals. So without further ado, everyone, I'm really looking forward to diving into this workshop. So let's just look at the bigger concept of communication. Communication is not just as you see me here right now. Now we're talking, there's a two-way or a one-way conversation in this case, but you understand what I'm saying. We're using language, we're using vocal cords, there's sound. Communication can also take form in so many other different ways. I mean, just look at the body, how the body is trying to communicate to us. Hence why, I wrote this book. It's all about listening to what the patterns are, listening to when there's stress, listen to when there's pain points, and listen to the body when it's trying to tell you there's a dysfunction of something, something is not working the way that it should. But the body doesn't communicate in English or in whatever your native language is. It has a whole different way of communicating through signals, signs, pain, discomfort, and all sorts of other methods as well. So communication also takes place, for example, from your brain to your body, right? To your vagus nerves, communicating to your organs and vice versa. We have also our skin constantly communicating with our environment, sending out all these little sensories to try and understand, what do I feel? What do I sense? What is out there? So even if we had to completely isolate verbal communication, communication is a never-ending story. It's communication everywhere. Animals, insects, the whole shebang. So what's beautiful and fun about this is when we look at communication in this context now, it's more about communication for us in a verbal sense, how to communicate, vocally, how to articulate ourselves, how to express our emotions, because that also is communication, helping people to know and understand how we're doing, how we're feeling, what we're thinking, where's pain points, to problem solve, to come together as a team, to, work together towards collective goals. So communication also is what makes the world go round. I sometimes wonder what life would be like if we didn't have, any form of communication. I mean, of course, we would probably think, well, we can become telepathic, but what if that was cut off as well? Or maybe we can use like eye contact. Well, like, what is that cut off? What if we start to use hand signals? What if that's cut off? You see, communication is so fundamentally important. It really, truly makes our lives and the whole world function. And when we look back at the history, right? The first means of communication was, of course, the human voice, recorded from our perspective, right? I'm not talking about, monkeys howling to each other. I'm talking about vocal communication that is articulated in a complex form and tone to actually create words that can be understood throughout generations. And this is now about 3,200 years before Christ. And that is when writing was also invented in Iraq and in Egypt. And it was also invented about 1,500 years before Christ in China. And many other civilizations in Central America also, like the Mayans, they also invented systems of writing. And of course, in South Africa, the Bushmen, they also invented forms of writing, however, through also pictures and images. Now, at the end of the day, what sets forward being a good communicator? That's always the most important point, because if we are good communicators, we wouldn't have most of these, arguments or wars or drama or domestic violence. So much would be more smooth, right? But now the problem is it's not just about communication. Sometimes I feel the communication aspect is perfectly fine. It is the emotions behind it. It is the emotions driving the communication that can make or break the quality of your communication. Now, this is where it is very important, where it, rather than looking at how good of a communicator am I, it begs the question, how much of a good communicator am I to myself? How much of a good communicator am I to my body and to my emotions that's coming up? How good can I communicate, heightened emotions when I feel them and articulate them clearly, practice self-awareness, emotional intelligence, to know and understand that sometimes when I have big emotions coming up and I'm talking to someone that it doesn't have anything to do with them, but sometimes we take out, right? We take out our wounds on someone else that didn't deserve it. I've done it as well. We've all done that. It happens. Sometimes we just snap. Now, this is where it is very important to look at communication from the perspective of not just you being a good communicator to others, but how good of a communicator are you to yourself, and listening to your body, listening to your messages. Because when we look at the perspective of just communication in itself, now let's say, and now we put that side apart, right, about knowing and understanding your own internal communication. This is something that we can do. You don't even need steps. You don't really need guidance for it. It's really, truly just practicing mindfulness. How do I feel right now? Is what I feel really, truly related to the person that I'm talking to right now? Is a boundary being overstepped? Like really analyzing, not over-analyzing in an obsessive way, but just analyzing through mindfulness. What is really, truly going on? And then assessing, is my reaction that I really want to take right now valid? Because we can't always control our emotions, but we can control how we articulate it, and we can control how we convey it. So that is a very important part there as well. But now let's also look at when we want to become better communicators. And now we're shifting the focus back to us becoming good communicators in society, right, towards others. Now, what we're going to be doing here is we're going to be going through some points that will be fundamentally important and really helpful to help you to really get you onto the path. But what's even more so important is that we will also be going and looking at how do we really start to internalize our emotions and how we want to communicate them. So now we're going to say, this is how we communicate, perfect, how we can communicate to society. But now we also need to go look at where the real core pain point is, which is actually within us, right? So we're going to dive deep in this mini workshop. We're going to dive really deep very fast, and we're going to go really right down to the root core point. And I'm going to help you to learn how to process this internal world and how to communicate that with ease and with grace. So guys, listen, if you would love this and if you want to finish this mini workshop, then please join us at matmembers.com. You can finish the entire mini workshop there. Go to webinar replays. And if you're not a MAT member, you can register for free, absolutely for free, because these webinars are there for life. We also host them every week on a Thursday. And then we have replays available, of course, for life. So you can always go back to them and check them out. So there you have it. So one of the first most important points is people always say, listen more and speak less. Well, that is great, only if you don't know what to say. So in that case, that's a great strategy. But let's say you are in a conversation where you actually feel really confident about what's being said and how you want to articulate yourself. Great. I love it for it to be like a tennis game. And normally what I do with people is I give them the 60% space to talk, and I will take the 40% space to talk, because it's always nice, especially when the conversation is more so, you can see the other person's maybe a bit stronger in the conversation. It's good to not always try to dominate, but it's good to also have a nice, fair, balanced exchange. So that concept where people say, listen more and speak less, that's great. But that's for topics if you don't understand it very well, or maybe you don't feel very confident in maybe socializing. If you don't feel very confident with your social skills, then absolutely, that strategy is going to work absolutely fantastic for you. Another one is that sometimes can be really hard, is to be fully present. Especially if you feel nervous, if you feel that you don't understand what someone is saying, and sometimes you just fade. Right? You just fade in a conversation, like you just check out because you just don't understand. Well, here's the great thing. And this is a great way to actually just propel a conversation even more forward. If you don't understand, ask why. Just say, wow, this is a new area for me. I haven't really explored that much, or I don't have a lot of experience with that. I would love to learn more. Wow, now the other person is talking about something that they love, and now you said that you don't understand what they're saying. Now they're going to be even more excited to talk to you because they love to explain what they do. They love to explain why they're passionate about something. This is a great way to guide a conversation as well. And you get to learn something, and someone else gets to feel really wonderful and validated as well, but in a very balanced way, not in an egotistical way, but in a very beautiful, platonic, natural, neutral way. So I really love that. I love it when conversations can kind of like, take that swing, especially as a cover up if you don't know what to do. So it kind of, at the end of the day, still has a really, really good outcome. Something that I had to also learn, and this came from my dad, because my dad talked at people, right? Like he talks at you. It's almost like he just blasts statements. And it's not a really conversation. It's more like just bah, bah, bah. And when you grow up in a household like that, that kind of like, it just sinks into you. It's just like, well, that's how we communicate, So sometimes people who can be like that, because sometimes feel very cold-hearted, they might feel very, oh, wow, this is all about them. Maybe it is because they have a fear of feedback. Maybe it is that they have a fear of being criticized or judged, because I realized that the reason why my dad did that was because that was his strategy to not be attacked. That was his strategy to not be criticized, because that was the story of his life. I get it, but it isn't always necessarily an excuse. So something very important that I learned that I absolutely love now is to talk with people and not at people, right? So when I talk to them, I actually speak in a conversation where I engage them in with what I'm saying. So sometimes I will say, wow, today is so hot, do you love hot weather, or would you prefer it to be cold? So do you see how I pull them into what I was saying? Like I made a statement, but I actually pulled them into hear what their opinion is of that and how do they feel about it. So it's not just, blasting people with, your opinions or values or perceived facts. It's more about making it then a two-way, right? So, and something also that I found that was really important for me that I had to learn as well was to be consistent, but don't repeat myself too much, especially when you get nervous. And sometimes you kind of like, you become that gramophone, I don't know if you guys grew up in the 80s, 90s and 80s, where you have that big gramophone and like that plate, and then it kind of gets stuck and it goes, right? So this is where I sometimes can also start to repeat myself a little bit. So I have to, and this is when I just don't know what else to say. And just acknowledge that, okay, I don't know what else to say. Switch the conversation to what is in front of you right now that you can talk about. Maybe it's the environment, maybe it's, maybe there's something great that happened. I love to actually watch, I have this app on Instagram that I love, the Good News app. And I love it so much because we focus so much on the bad stuff that when when people talk about something bad, or maybe the atmosphere is a bit negative, or you like, I don't know what to say. And I love always to say, you know what, I'm on this app, this about good news. And did you know that XYZ happened in this world? Like, isn't that fantastic? And just really go into success, bring up the vibration of success, bring up the vibration of positivity and good news. And you will see how that can also really beautifully change a conversation and actually leave the other person probably also in a much more positive headspace as well. Another one also is to use your voice wisely. normally when you talk about something, it's important that like there's some accents where when people talk, it's like and then you get people that's overly emotional. It's like you know, it's like so in that case, try to find your middle ground. Be aware, and even when you speak to people, ask them for feedback. Like when I just talked right now, what did it sound like? What was it like? And just play with that, practice that, you know, have a nice little tone where you can go up, down, and don't hit the spike and don't go down to the low, and just don't be the boring one that you want to listen to. You know what I mean? It's like a flat line. So also what I love to do is if I'm unsure, I actually pretend, or not pretend, but it's more so bring your voice down to the point where you deliberately don't want to talk too loud. And that actually already has a very soothing effect. So it actually can also calm and relax the other person. Now, a lot of people also say in conversation, well, when you talk to people, make it about them. Guys, that's only when you don't know what to say again. Make it about them. Perfect. If you feel nervous, if you feel absolutely flabbergasted, make it all about them. Fantastic. That's your lifeline. But if you are a communicator where you like to exchange information, be mindful, you know, make it about you and make it about them as well. Let it be like a tennis game, right? So another thing also is note your body language, because this is very important. You know, when you're going to sit like this or you're like that, you know, you look bored. I prefer also not to talk with my hands in my pocket. I normally either like to hold a glass in my hand, or maybe you have a snack in your hand, but hands in pockets and folded arms is just a no-no, right? Even if you just want to stand with your hands on your hips, that can also actually project like, do I really have to listen to you? Like, it's just not, that's also a bit of a no-no for me. So find something fun that you can hold, or, you know, if you just don't know what to do with your hands, that's a great way to do it. Sometimes if you have a jacket, I like to hold one, you know, maybe one hand on the jacket or something like that. Or even if you just want to hold your hands like that, that's great too. But the full, you know, lock, it's like, don't come too close. And people can feel that, even if they don't understand body language. All right. So it's just already a very, what would you say? It's a bit of a global language to do it that way. So guys, what I would love for you to do is now, it's take your notepads out. Because what we're going to do is, so I hope that helped. I really hope that helped. So what I shared with you is tools and techniques that I use for myself, and it worked really, really well for me. So I would love to hear from you. How does it work for you? So now we're going to have our notepads out, or if you don't have a notepad, you can just use your computer, you can use your phone, iPad, whatever is most comfortable for you. Because right now, what I would love for you to do with you is to go through a few questions that's going to help you to become a better communicator. All right. So what I would love for you now is to, let's just pretend that there's something that you want to say. Let's just come up with anything. Maybe you want to make a statement. Maybe you want to express a boundary. Maybe you just want to have a conversation with someone. So let me just get a feel for, what do I want to say? For example, if I had to say something, what would I want to say? Maybe I want to give feedback. Maybe someone here at the house did something and I want to say, I hired a construction worker and it wasn't completely correct what he did, and now I need to give him feedback. Okay, so I need to express a correction and a polite boundary. All right. Okay, so now we have that. Secondly is, I want you to feel what you want to say. Don't just think about what you want to say. Feel what you want to say. So I'm feeling the boundary. I'm feeling the dissatisfaction. I'm aware of any reactions that I might have, or even overreactions that I might have. I'm aware of it. Okay, so now at least I have a grip on how I feel. Got it. And now I can consciously choose how to explain it. And if you don't have words sometimes for what you want to explain, you can start with metaphorical examples, or you can speak in examples. just, I don't know how to say what I want to say, but imagine something like that happen, and then this happens. And this is kind of like how I'm feeling right now. This is also a wonderful way to communicate to people and help them to understand how you're feeling. But now in this way, what I would like to say is, in terms of giving feedback, this is now perhaps criticism. It is not about attacking the person. It is about looking at what was done and then saying, here's the error. How can we find a solution? If I don't perhaps already have a solution that I can suggest, and then asking that person, do you feel that will work? Right? Or do you perhaps have a solution as well? And don't say the word, well, do you have something better? It's not a competition. Don't let them feel that it's competitive, because that's just going to put them in defense, right? So how I would now I have to think how I'm going to say this. Okay. So the wall was painted. There were gaps where you can still see that it wasn't painted thoroughly. And so now I will ask, can I just show you something here on the wall? Can you see there's certain gaps here still? Can you please put on another coat to fill up these gaps? Would you agree to that? Oh, yes, I can also see above. Okay, great. So you see, so instead of saying, look at all of this, what are you going to do? Like this terrible job. The criticism is just not going to help. It's just not going to help, right? Unless you feel the need to punish the person, but now we need to look at who we're punishing you. Okay, so everything has a driver and a motivator behind that. So, and that is also why the other point is, when we look at, when you feel what you want to say, we make sure that in that moment, that how can I talk with the person and not at them? Because we don't want them in defense mode, because then they're going to feel that you are trying to be superior to them. It can trigger their ego, it can trigger their self-esteem, it can trigger so many things. And then you lose track of what you were trying to accomplish in the first place. And you just end up being in a unnecessary tug of war. It's just so unnecessary. And when we look at those points, what I want to ask you now is to see your pattern of communication and to kind of like find certain ways in terms of where it could be coming from. Now, my question to you is, how were you communicated to? In a defensive way, in a passive way, in a fearful way, in a aggressive way, in a irritating way, in a patronizing way, shameful or guilt? How would you say you were communicated to? Okay, so my answer that I wrote down here was aggressive and threatening. Okay. Now, my next question to you is, how did your parents communicate to each other? So my answer was aggressive and threatening, more so from my dad. My mom was always the peacekeeper. She always kept quiet. And so now the question is, how do you feel you communicate? How do you feel you communicate? Are you following the same patterns, or are you trying to overcompensate by overcorrecting, by perhaps not communicating at all because of these wounds? How do you communicate? Now, my next question for you is, imagine that you are now in a situation where you are communicating yourself based on how you wrote that down. Because my answer was, in the past, I don't do this anymore, but in the past, I also communicated aggressively and threatening. Like, I would threaten, people, or not in an aggressive way, but I would give ultimatums, right? And it was very passive aggressive type of communication. It was not as verbally violent as my dad, because I was more trying to suppress it, but it was still coming out. And so now my question to you is, I would like for you, and I invite you to put yourself now in your imagination, in a situation where you are communicating yourself, where you can feel yourself in these patterns that you just wrote down. I'd like for you now just to take a nice deep breath and imagine that. And as you are feeling that, as you are aware of that, whose face do you hear, feel, see, or sense? Just 1, 2, 3, boom, instantly. Don't even think about it, just boom. Just imagine there's a screen and someone's face is there, or you hear someone, or you sense someone that you know. Okay. I saw my mom and dad. Okay. Interesting. I didn't expect to see my mom. So now what we're going to do here in this case is, I would love for you to write down this statement. I acknowledge the difference between my truth and my mother and father's truth. And I say this because their truth, in terms of how they communicated their truth, you don't have to follow that style, whether it was aggressive or whether it was suppressed, whatever and however they filtered their truth, that style, those filters don't have to be with you. You can now find your own authentic, beautiful filters to communicate yourself. So I would love for you to write down, I acknowledge the difference between my truth and my mother and this person's truth. In this case, my mother and father's truth. This is my case. So write that down. Okay. And guys, there you have it. So when you feel that your emotions are getting too much, when you feel things are bubbling and you just don't know how to communicate yourself, in that moment, I acknowledge the difference between my truth and this person's truth that you just wrote down. Help your subconscious mind now to rewire and unprogram itself from having copied subconsciously someone else's style of communication, because that is clearly in conflict with yours. And that is why you might feel blocked, because I feel this person's triggers coming. Oh, I'm feeling their patterns that I copied coming up, but I don't agree with it. It's not in alignment with me. Here's mine, but then boom, there's a huge clash. Start to unprogram yourself and start to align with your own beautiful truth and filters to communicate that, and call your power back from how you were communicated to, and gracefully call back your most truest, authentic form of divine communication. Guys, thank you so much for being here with me today. And until next time, be the light that you are. Bye, everyone.